Hey, man.
Hey,
All
happy
right.
Sunday to you.
Yeah.
Got some in my eye.
So we
So,
are on 187 in the PDF, and did you
yes,
say
sir.
three what in the book?
398 in the blue book. We finished off the founding of the hierarchy last week with our short video. And today we pick up and start the new group of world servers, still in rule 10. A very, very lengthy rule, but we're getting through it nonetheless. So yeah, we'll be picking up the new group of world servers, which appears at the top of 398. And like you said, 187 on the PDF. So
All right, let's do it. You
with
want
that,
to start, or
yeah,
you
I'll
ready?
get it started.
All right.
So let me wet my throat a little bit. All right. So the new group of world servers. We have spoken often of the integrating group of knowers who are beginning to function upon the earth, gathered together in loose formation and held by the inner spiritual tie and not by any outer organization. The planetary hierarchy has always existed, and from time immemorial and right down the ages, those sons of men who have fitted themselves for work and who have measured up to the requirements have found their way into the ranks of those who stand behind the world evolution and guide the destinies of the little ones. Their grades and works are theoretically known, and names of some have been given out to the masses. At what cost and personal sacrifice those masses will never know. With the hierarchy of adepts, I do not propose to deal. The books upon the subject are easily available and should be read with the needed reservations as to symbolical interpretations and the limiting effects of words. An event is, however, transpiring upon Earth which is, in its way, as momentous and as important as that crisis in Atlantean times when the physical, vital, and astral bodies were coordinated and formed a functioning unit. Then the yoga of devotion, or bhakti yoga, was initiated for the training of the aspirants at that time. A physical plane replica, as far as such a replica was then possible, was organized of those who could work devotedly and who could learn through the use of ceremonial and pictures some mode of activity which would carry on the hierarchical work on Earth and thus constitute a training school for those who later would be admitted into the ranks of the hierarchy. The remnants of this Atlantean group remain with us in the modern Masonic movements, and the work of the hierarchy was thus perpetuated in sign and symbol. There has thus been preserved in the consciousness of the race a pictorial presentation of a momentous planetary condition, which worked out in the human family in this threefold coordination. But it was primarily objective. Form and symbol, tool and furniture, temple and tone, office and externalities were the prominent factors. They veiled the truth and therefore preserved the outer and visible form of an inner and spiritual reality. Only those were, in those days, allowed to participate in these mysteries and work who felt within themselves the longing and desire for the mystical vision, and who loved deeply and were devoted to the spiritual ideal. They were not required to possess active mentalities, and their intellectual powers were practically nil. They liked and needed authority. They learnt through ceremonial. They were devoted to the great ones whose names and forms stood behind the office holders in the esoteric lodges. Mind entered not in. This must be remembered. There were no personalities. Today, in the world, another great moment of crisis has arrived. I refer not to the present world condition, but to the state of the human consciousness. Mind has arrived at a functioning power. Personalities are coordinated. The three aspects of man are being blended. Another formation or precipitation from the hierarchy of adepts has become possible. On the physical plane, without any exoteric organization, ceremonials, or outer form, there is integrating silently, steadily, and powerfully a group of men and women who will supersede eventually the previous hierarchical effort. They will supersede all churches, all groups, and all organizations, and will eventually constitute that oligarchy of elect souls who will govern and guide the world. They are being gathered out of every nation, but are gathered and chosen not by the watching hierarchy or by any master, but by the power of their response to the spiritual opportunity, tide, and note. They are emerging out of every group and church and party, and will therefore be truly representative. This they do, not from the pull of their own ambition and prideful schemes, but through the very selflessness of their service. They are finding their way to the top in every department of human knowledge, not because of the clamor they make about their own ideas, discoveries, and theories, but because they are so inclusive in their outlook and so wide in their interpretation of truth that they will see the hand of God in all happenings, his imprint upon all forms, and his note surrounding forth through every channel of communication between the subjective reality and the objective outer form. They are of all races, they speak all languages, they embrace all religions, all sciences, and all philosophies. Their characteristics are synthesis, inclusiveness, intellectuality, and fine mental development. They own to no creed, save the creed of brotherhood based on the one life. They recognize no authority save that of their own souls, and no master save the group they seek to serve and humanity whom they deeply love. They have no barriers set up around themselves, but are governed by a wide tolerance and a sane mentality and sense of proportion. They look with open eyes upon the world of men and recognize those whom they can lift and to whom they can stand as the great ones stand, lifting, teaching, and helping. They recognize their peers and equals and know each other when they meet and stand shoulder to shoulder with their fellow workers in the work of salvaging humanity. It does not matter if their terminologies differ, their interpretations of symbols and scriptures vary, or their words are few or many. They see their group members in all fields, political, scientific, religious, and economic, and give to them the sign of recognition and the hand of a brother. They recognize likewise those who have passed ahead of them upon the ladder of evolution and hail them teacher, and seek to learn from them that which they are so eager to impart. This group is a product of the past, and upon that past I will touch. I will also indicate the present situation and forecast somewhat the general lines along which their association and future work will run. That such a group is forming is true and holds a good augury for the coming decades. In quiet and subtle ways, they are already making their presence felt, but theirs is as yet primarily a subjective influence. Let us begin with the past. About 1400, the hierarchy of masters. About the year 1400, the hierarchy of masters was faced with a difficult situation. As far as the work of the second ray was concerned, which had to do with the impartation of spiritual truth, there had come to be what I might call a complete exteriorization of that truth. The activity of the first ray had also brought about an intense differentiation and crystallization among the nations and governments of the world. These two conditions of concrete orthodoxy and political differences persisted for many generations and are still manifesting. Today, we have a similar condition both in the world of religion and in that of politics. This is true whether one is considering India or America, China or Germany, or whether one is studying the history of Buddhism with its many sects, Protestantism with its myriads of warring groups, or the many schools of philosophy in the Orient or the Occident. The condition is widespread, and the public consciousness tremendously diversified, but this state of affairs marks the summation of the period of separativeness and the end, before so many centuries, of this intense distinctiveness of thought. After noting and watching this trend of affairs for another 100 years, the elder brothers of the race called a conclave of all departments about the year 1500 A.D. Their object was to determine how to urge the integration, which is essentially the keynote of our universal order, could be hastened, and what steps could be taken to produce that synthesis and unification in the world of thought, which would make possible the manifestation of the purpose of the divine life which had brought all into being. When the world of thought is unified, then the outer world will fade into a synthetic order. It should be remembered here that the masters think in large terms and work in the wider cycles of evolutionary endeavor. The tiny and temporary cycles, the small ebb and flow of the cosmic processes, do not engage their attention in the first instance.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So this is just the history, how we got
And
here.
that right there, that
Excuse me.
the tiny and temporary cycles, the small ebb and flow, do not engage their attention. That they're just really looking at the big picture. So in that, you might be able to get a sense for what that might look like too, as far as dropping the immediacy of what we're looking at in our daily life. I mean, like in order to not even look at the tiny and temporary anymore, this is where this goes, is what I'm saying, right? You're going to the place where you don't even look at the tiny cycles. That's pretty wild, because we have that's really all we're generally focused on.
So at this conclave, they had three things to do. And the they, again, is the elder brothers of the race, called the Conclave of All Departments, about the 1500 AD. So at this conclave, they had three things to do. One, to view the divine plan on as large a scale as possible and refresh their minds with the vision. Two, to note what influences or energies were available for use in the large endeavor to which they were pledged. And three, to train the men and women who were then probationers, chelas, and initiates, so that in due time they could have a satisfactory band of assistants on whom they could in future centuries rely. They had, in connection with these aspirants, two problems. One, they had to deal with the failure of the part of even the most advanced disciples to preserve continuity of consciousness, a failure even now manifested by even initiates. And two, the masters found the minds and brains of chelas curiously insensitive to the higher contacts, and this again is a condition which still prevails. The chelas then as now possessed aspiration, a desire to serve humanity, devotion, and occasionally a fair mental equipment, but that telepathic sensitivity, that instinctive response to hierarchical vibration, and that freedom from the lower psychism, which are the needed prerequisites to intensive intelligent work, were singularly lacking. For that matter, they are still distressingly so. Telepathic sensitivity is decidedly on the increase as a result of world conditions and the evolutionary trend, and this is, for the workers on the inner plane, a most encouraging sign. But love of psychic phenomena and failure to differentiate between the vibrations of the various grades of hierarchical workers still greatly hinder the work. You might here ask, and rightly so, what is this plan? When I speak of the plan, I do not mean such a general one as the plan of evolution or the plan for humanity, which we call by the somewhat unmeaning term of soul unfoldment. These two aspects of the scheme for our planet are taken for granted and are but modes, processes, and means to a specific end. The plan as at present sensed, and for which the masters are steadily working, might be defined as follows. It is the production of a subjective synthesis in humanity and of a telepathic interplay which will eventually annihilate time. It will make available to every man all past achievements and knowledges. It will reveal to man the true significance of his mind and brain and make him the master of that equipment, and will make him therefore omnipresent and eventually open the door to omniscience.
That's wild, man. I mean, he's alluding to, the need for to be telepathic. It requires, essentially being present in the moment. You can't be time traveling or wandering imaginatively all over the place.
Right.
You've got to be clear right now, and be in order to be receptive. Kind of sitting on that timeline, if you will. I mean, timeline, you get it? See, there's a little play. The fine line of time, just in the moment.
Yeah. Well, and he talks about the telepathic and psychic too, how that seems to be on the rise, but we need to be careful about getting lost in the phenomena behind it, because that's not where we're supposed to be taking it. So.
Yeah, and that's very much astral too, the lower psychism. So we need to, I just stay the course, I want to say, right? Like, that's how the more I read this material every week that goes by, man, I'm just like, just don't stop. Just whatever you do, just keep moving ahead and don't look right and left too much. And if you do, I mean, it's fine, but then just keep going. Don't ever stop with this material. And, it's interesting because Carla has said that so many times. And you got to get to that point, I guess. We got to get to that point. And I think I got to it where I'm just like, okay, I will not be going right and left. It's just straight ahead. And that seems to be what we're talking about here.
All right. So this next development of the plan will produce in man an understanding, intelligent and cooperative, of the divine purpose for which the one in whom we live and move and have our being has deemed it wise to submit to incarnation. Think not that I can tell of the plan as it truly is. It is not possible for any man below the grade of initiate of the 3rd degree to glimpse it and far less understand it. The development of the mechanism whereby a disciple may be en rapport with those responsible for the working out of the plans, and the capacity to know, and not just dimly sense, that tiny aspect of the whole which is the immediate step ahead, and with which cooperation is possible, that can be achieved by all disciples and should be held as the goal before all aspirants. With the exception of probationary disciples who are not as yet sufficiently stable in their endeavor, all can therefore strive towards achieving continuity of consciousness, and at awakening that inner light which, when seen and intelligently used, will serve to reveal other aspects of the plan, and especially that one to which the illumined, however, can respond and usefully serve. So that, I think, that pretty much just encapsulates what you were just talking about. I hope just stay in the course.
And that continuity of consciousness would seem to be a result or the right of that. Is that what we're going with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because it's, when you get to that point of, I guess, entering into initiation, or you're on the path of initiation, right? Is that what that's saying here? Because the exception of probationary disciples, and the probationary disciples are what? Those that are
before the first initiation, I want to say.
Right. Yeah.
Or I mean, I don't know, technically you could say before the 3rd even. I don't know. I think I just always thought I was like, I'm just going to consider that I'm on probation just
right. Well, it just says here that they're not yet sufficiently stable in their endeavor. All can therefore strive towards achieving continuity of consciousness, and at awakening that inner light which, when seen and intelligently used, will serve to reveal other aspects of the plan, especially that one to which the illumined knower can respond and usefully serve. So I don't know where I was going with that,
The
but
continuity of consciousness is that's really something that doesn't happen until after the third
right.
initiation, I want to say. That's a pretty big deal, right?
Well, that's where we're supposed to be headed. So
Right.
that's what we're supposed to be working towards.
Certainly.
And if you're there, maintain it.
Dude, when I read, and I was reading Glamour earlier in the week, and it's overwhelming because DK is always saying what the immense opportunity that's available to us right here today and right now. And it's really available. We can really do this if we set our feet to the path, I guess, right? So just immense opportunity right now, specifically. So, we're not the kind of dudes who, we're going to be trying and losing an opportunity like that.
No, sir. Not here. To bring this about has been the objective of all training given during the past 400 years. And from this fact, you can vision the utter patience of the knowers of the race. They work slowly and with deliberation, free from any sense of speed towards their objective. But, and herein lies the immediate interest of what I have to communicate, they do have a time limit.
A time limit. Yeah.
This is based upon the law of cycles. It concerns the operation of certain periods of opportunity, which necessarily have their term. During these times of opportunity, forces, influences, and energies are temporarily at work, and of these, the masters seek to make use. Looking ahead, during the conclave to which I have made reference, the assembled servers of the race noted the future coming in of the Aquarian age, with its distinctive energies and its amazing opportunities. These they noted, and they sought to prepare man for that period which would approximate 2,500 years, and which could, if duly utilized, bring about the unification consciously and intelligently of mankind, and so produce the manifestation of what I prefer to call scientific brotherhood, in contradistinction to the sentimental connotation of the term now so prevalent. It appeared to them at that time that it would be necessary to do two things before the coming potencies of the Aquarian age could profitably be employed. First of all, humanity must have its consciousness elevated to the mental plane. It must be expanded so that it included not only the world of emotion and of feeling, but also that of the intellect. The minds of men must be made widely and generally active, and the entire level of human intelligence must be raised. It was necessary, secondly, that something should be done to break down the barriers of separateness, of isolation, and of prejudice, which were keeping men apart from each other, and which they foresaw would increasingly do so. Cycle by cycle, men were becoming more and more wrapped up in their own selves, satisfaction and exclusiveness and racial pride. The result of this would lead inevitably to wide cleavages and the erection of world barriers between nation and nation and between race and race. This determination of the members of the hierarchy to train the minds of men were more rapidly and to build towards, let me read that again. This determination of the members of the hierarchy to train the minds of men more rapidly and to build towards a more synthetic unity brought them to a decision which involved the formation of group units and brought about the emergence of those groups of workers and thinkers who, through their activities, have so largely governed and molded our world for the past 3 or 4 centuries. We have therefore, dating from this conclave, the inauguration of definite and specific group work along clearly defined lines, which, with each group standing for some peculiar presentation of truth and for some aspect of the knowledge of reality. These groups fall generally into four major divisions: cultural, political, religious, and scientific. In more modern times, three other groups have definitely emerged. They are the philosophical, the psychological, and the financial groups. Philosophers have, of course, always been with us, but they have been, for the most part, isolated units who have founded schools characterized by partisanship and separativeness. Now there are no outstanding figures as in the past, but groups who represent certain ideas. It is of profound importance that the work of these 7 groups of thinkers be recognized as part of the hierarchical program, designed to produce a certain situation, to bring about certain preparatory conditions, and as playing a definite part in the work of world evolution as far as humanity is concerned. Under the influence of the different rays as they cycled in and out of activity, little groups of men emerged, played their part in group formation, and disappeared, often unaware of their inherent synthesis and of their co-workers. As can be seen in any intelligent historical retrospect, the work that they did for the race and their contribution to the pageant of the progress of mankind stands out with clarity. I have not the time to take this procession of groups, each custodian of a special contribution, and trace for you the work they did or the subjective impulses under which they worked. I can but indicate the trend of their endeavor, and leave to some illumined student of history the delineation of the golden thread of their spiritual work as they raised the mental standard of the race and put man en rapport with the world in which he lived, opening his eyes not only to the nature of matter and of form, but also the hidden depths of his own being. Through their activities, we now have a humanity in close relation, though not at one, and a humanity characterized by 3 things. The first of which is an amazing interrelation and intercommunication of which the radio, the press, modern transportation, and the telephone and telegraph are the servants. The second, a widespread philanthropic enterprise, and the growth of the sense of responsibility for one's brother, which was totally unknown in the year 1500. Movements such as the Red Cross, educational foundations, hospitals, and the present economic relief measures to be found in every country are its exoteric manifestations. And 3, a division of the entire human family, consciously or unconsciously, into 2 basic groups. First, those who stand for the old order of things, who are reactionary and separative. They represent separative nationalism, boundaries, servitude, and servile obedience. They exemplify religious sectarianism and dependency upon authority. They are against all modern innovations and progress. Secondly, those who vision a unified world wherein love of God means love of one's neighbor, and where the motives underlying all religious, political, and educational activities are characterized by a world consciousness and the welfare of the entire body and not of the part.
So let's talk about this for just a second here.
Yeah.
I want to go back up before we got into these characterized by 3 things. I was talking to Carla this week, and she had said, essentially there's a few different types of people here. There's the people here who hit the ground running with a mission that is kind of already built in, right? Doctors, certain types of people with jobs like that,
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the best one I can think of. But they had a mission, and they know they had to go do this certain thing, right? Or maybe they knew they were going to be physics professors or something, or and then there's also a group of people who didn't really have a mission, so to speak. But they knew they had to do something, but they don't know what. And so by not knowing what, we learn by trial and error in early life to come around to find out that it was not an objective mission. It was a subjective mission, a spiritual mission, more or less. And then there's the group who ultimately, they just follow, they're just kind of in the middle, like they're doing what seems to come up. But we're looking for is the people who are kind of know they're here, the people who are more on the spiritual mission. And you can see this. It's like an identification. Like they're identifying themselves out there. And so another way to see this group, because these physics professors who are working on quantum are needed. These kids that are coders are needed to grow the communication systems. Like all these, like this is all needed. But then there's this group that we're looking for, and we're in this chapter. It's interesting, the new group of world servers. And how do you identify this group? And it's just awesome, man. And it's amazing to see, because we didn't really know, we didn't really fit in. They don't really fit in with the exoteric movement so much, right? Like, it's hard to recognize, and you do feel like maybe you don't fit in certain ways. But the fact of the matter is you're looking for the exoteric expression, and that's not really what you're here to. You're really here to work on the more spiritual side of these things, or the subjective side. But it's also interesting to see that all of these other things that are happening, the Red Cross movements, and how science is growing and the communications departments are growing, that's all absolutely part of it, of this growth. Man, it's amazing, and then, we see this, we have these people who want to hold back the growth.
Yeah.
And then we have the group who is probably much more advanced than they can really recognize, who are trying to speed up the growth. And they're much more advanced than they realize. But there's also the group of the hierarchy who is much, much more advanced than anybody can possibly realize.
Right.
So there's all this going on at once, and it's really intense. Because here we sit, figuring these things out, essentially. But the entire division of the entire human family constituted into basic groups, and now we're breaking it down. Those who,
those two subgroups that you talked about. There's this group of old thinkers that want to hold us back and don't really want, I guess, the race to move forward.
And that is the exoteric expression of that, DK says, is able to be seen in our political two-party system.
Right.
And this here would be the higher expression of the two-party system. But because we can't see these things, this is how it is essentially playing out in front of us, where there's this really ugly, but we see that coming to a head too, I think, certainly. And it's just totally corrupt and distorted and in need of change. Right.
Yeah. Well, and you've got the second group here that are the agents of change, so to speak.
Well, the new group of world servers were said to be coming in at the end of that century.
And I think that we're starting to see kind of that scale tip towards the change movement. So, because I think more and more people have come to the realization that things do need to change in order for things to get better. So
there's so much involved in this. It's unbelievable. I talked to Carla the other day just about how, many doctors were trying to induce pregnancies and to induce birth in the morning, right? So they can have the rest of their day free and open, essentially.
Right.
They want to come on shift, they get the babies out of the way and then move on. Well, when kids are born during certain hours, like between 6 and 8 in the morning, that puts them in a certain house on the astrology chart.
And it might not be the house that they were supposed to come in on.
Yeah, but the between 6 and 8 in the morning is the 12th house, which is run by Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune, which is very spiritual. So you got a generation of kids being induced coming in that were coming in the mornings now, who are born in the 12th house and are all going to be have a spiritual generation of kids.
Yeah.
Thanks to this. You can't make it up.
So no, you can't. But perhaps that is exactly what and how it needed to unfold for this to happen. And I'm going to use my own kids as the example because both were, well, my son was an unplanned, like we were planning natural childbirth, but ended up having to be an emergency C-section. But the thing is he was coming. He just couldn't get out. So they had to take him out. But that was his time, right? And it was in the morning. Now my daughter was a planned C-section. So there was a time planned when we were going to be in the hospital for that to happen. But the interesting thing about her is she was coming anyway already at that, like, it's like a few hours before that time of coming that struck. And it was like, it was ready to happen. So back to my earlier point that, so I think that, it is that time for us to see that kind of influx of those, I guess, spiritual warriors that are coming in. And so it is interesting to look at the doctors who planned those inducements in the early morning, and probably most of them, if not all of them, not really realizing what it was they were doing, because they were probably looking at it from a selfish perspective of, I'm getting the rest of my day off after I finish through this round of work. But the plan had it in that, and that was in the cards in the plan all along, because that's when these kids are supposed to be coming in.
Well, DK keeps saying throughout all these books that they're going to be coming towards the end of the century.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote these books
at the beginning of the last century. Right.
Now look at the ages of those who came at the end of the century.
Right.
They're becoming adults now.
Yeah.
We're becoming adults now.
Yeah.
You can't have spiritual warriors that are children, essentially. Like they're not going to be listening. They can't be involved in politics. The people that are going to be making change have to be adults in the system. So so they're going to be right. It's going to be right about now. And there's a lot of talk about 2025 and the new energies in the fourth ray coming in, and there's a lot going on here that we're sitting right now in the midst of, that we can really be aware of. And this is going to happen. We just had these, lots of big astrological transits that are allowing for change to happen in some of the key countries, right? Like the United States just had a giant Pluto, big Pluto transit, and it's just now over. So now the changes can start to be felt.
Yeah, now we're going to see how it all unfolds.
A lot was revealed and dug up during that time. I mean, so much was dug up during that year, that 9 months or whatever. we're going to be unpacking this for a while, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And now this group that we're talking about has the ability to bring this out and people can see it because it's been dug up from underground, essentially. What a wild ride. I mean, it's can't really say it enough how amazing this,
Yeah. It's pretty wild to think about that.
Yeah. I didn't mean to go off to get
Oh,
off too
no.
far there, but it's just
That was good. And it was an interesting point about the inducement of children by the doctors. That's I
crazy.
never really thought about that before, but it does kind of put things into perspective in terms of
You
things
got
are
a
going
whole
to
generation of 12th house,
but it's the way it was supposed to work out.
and it's good, yeah, because it
is good because
kids.
we're moving towards the second group that he talks about in that previous point 3, right? So it's good. It's good.
Great. Yeah.
So, all right. The unification to which the forward-looking people aspire does not involve the neglect of any part, but it does involve the care and nurture of each part in order that it may contribute to the well-being of the entire organism. It involves, for instance, the right government and proper development of every national unit so that it can adequately perform its international duties and thus form part of a world brotherhood of nations. This concept does not even involve the formation of a world state, but it does involve the development of a universal public consciousness which realizes the unity of the whole and thus produces the determination that each must be for all and all for each, as it has been said.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. This line right here, the concept does not even involve the formation of a world state. That disproves that disproves, whether they're saying, they want, one world,
a one world government. That's right, like the whole WEF initiative.
You're misconstruing it.
Absolutely.
You're mistaken in what was actually being attempted to be said.
So it's interesting you bring that up because, right, that's out there. Now, there's some people that have gotten on the wagon with that, but there's a huge population, I think, that does not agree with that state. And that leads me to think that perhaps there's a larger group of people pushing towards this. Many of them might not really know or be able to conceptualize what it is that they're kind of working towards yet, as we've discussed earlier. You and I have been on this path, but there's probably people who are going through these changes and having these feelings, but not really understanding or knowing what's going on and the change they're going through. Eventually they'll get there. But you're right. The formation of a world state is kind of being shoved down everybody's throats by entities like WEF and things like that.
The original idea of the United Nations was supposed to be, as DK said, the outer expression of this. That didn't mean it was the soul. It wasn't going to be said that there wasn't going to be decentralized execution.
Right.
It didn't even allude to centralized control. It didn't even necessarily allude to that. It just meant once the world recognizes the oneness, there's going to have to be some sharing of resources, of responsibilities, making sure that we would want to make sure that every human has what's needed.
Right.
Trade would be purposefully done to ensure that.
Right.
Like all these things would be done in an intelligent way once everyone realizes what's actually going on here. And we're not trying to rip each other off
Right.
in the process, you know, because right now it's selfish. It's based on selfishness.
Absolutely. But in order for us to get there, there's a lot of desire and glamour that has to dissolve off.
Once you recognize universal public consciousness, which recognizes the unity of the whole, everything changes, dude.
Mhm.
Everything has to change because everything changes inside each person. You will never, it's harmlessness is what starts to come out eventually. You know, it works its way out from that point. Everything changes. National unself, we're about to get into it. We can just keep going, I guess, because it's just common sense when we see this brotherhood of humanity, the changes that need to happen. We get it, and almost immediately. Now, there may be difficult execution, and it may take time and processes, but once everybody starts to realize this, the changes, you're going to be strange when you are the selfish person,
Right.
because you're the less evolved. You don't yet realize the brotherhood of humanity. You're the one that we need to educate, not the other way around. The person who is selfish is going to be the outcast at that point. There's no room for that. So the tides will turn. But he's about to start talking about this, I have a feeling.
All right. Well, let's see.
Only in this way.
Only in this way can there be brought about an international synthesis, which will be characterized by political and national unselfishness. This universal state of mind will not again inevitably involve the founding of a world or universal religion. It requires simply the recognition that all formulations of truth and of relief are only partial in time and space, and are temporarily suited to the temperaments and conditions of the age and race. Those who favor some particular approach to the truth will nevertheless achieve the realization that other approaches and other modes of expression and terminologies and other ways of defining deity can be equally correct and in themselves constitute aspects of a truth which is greater and vaster than man's present equipment can grasp and express. Even the great ones themselves but dimly sense reality, and though they are aware of deeper underlying purposes than are their chelas, yet even they see not the ultimate goal. They too are forced to use such unmeaning terms in their teaching as absolute reality and ultimate realization.
Yeah, and then this goes into the fact that just because these other systems are in place, they were all useful to get us to where we are now.
Right.
Whether they used anthropomorphic deities in Hindi and all, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was all nonsense. It doesn't even matter if it's all illusion, essentially, because as long as it works, that's the result is all that matters. And we need to recognize this, that everything that we've been exposed to has worked, is working, was purposeful in time and space, temporary. The idea was there, the ideal came. We don't let it become an idol. You can't get stuck on anything. You have to just keep going. It's just so, this is like, if everybody could read this statement in the world today and grasp this, then we're walking out into a new earth later this afternoon.
Right. Well, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Maybe, you never know. One of these days.
One could only hope. I'm sure at some point we'll get there.
It's coming.
It would be wonderful to see that in this lifetime for sure.
I got a feeling. I got a feeling. I really do, man. We're close to this.
No, it might have to. I'm sure there's going to have to be some chaos and suffering before we get there, because it's kind of how things seem to be teetering. But yeah, it would be wonderful to see.
I mean,
people come to this realization.
These two paragraphs. what more? I don't know what, that's the magic of this stuff that we're reading. We don't, yeah, we got these people out there, you think this is, they think this is Luciferian evil, some kind of evil doctrine. This is all about Christ.
This is talking about
the
unity.
return
I don't
of
understand.
Christ.
Yeah,
It's all about the brotherhood of humanity. What the heck are you talking about?
loving
man?
thy neighbor. I don't understand. It's gibberish and nonsense coming out of the mouths of people that have never even cracked these books, is what it is. Never even opened their minds or their eyes to the truth. They're just going off of rhetoric that's being forced down their throats, and that's what they're moving forward with. And they come across that in such a hateful way. How can you sit there and say that us trying to profess and reach out and give expression of love and unity is evil? It is just preposterous to me. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent.
It's upside down, right?
It is upside down, and it's just, they're out there. They're going to be out there. It is what it is. But like you said, the hope and the feeling is that people are eventually going to come to this and realize that, we've got to open up and shed away the veils of illusion, stop listening to the lies. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent.
No, man, it's great. I think, because we've seen this movement in our lives, it's obviously possible for the whole, right? And because these others before us have seen this way before us, and it's been written about, this is the progression. This is the plan. This is the progression. And it, it's just going to work itself out. And we can just be the watchers and observe this essentially. And do the silent work and just keep working.
Yeah. Well, the people out there that are the naysayers, they're letting themselves be led by the fear. And we've talked about fear before.
Yeah, it's a glamour. They're stuck, they're prisoners of their own glamours and illusions.
They're prisoners of the fear, and the fears of the unknown, and the realization of the truth, the real truth. And that's what you and I are trying to get out there, is some of this real truth. So hopefully some people are listening to it, can resonate with it, and then in turn help their brothers and sisters get there as well. So anyway, I'm glad we had that little tangent. It was good to get that out. Excuse me.
No, and at some point, man, as we're talking about this, that we talk about tension points, right? We were talking about that earlier. The more we do this, the closer we are to this point. We got to do this more. We have to continue these talks and these conversations. Has to be reach more. There has to be more people that start doing these. There's no monopoly on, there's no intellectual properties on it when it comes to wisdom and love and energies of you can't patent this stuff. You can't bottle this. This is just needs to be shared. It's crazy. It's so simple. It's so simple.
And if you do try to patent or trademark it, you're kind of heading in the wrong direction, aren't you? Because this is for everybody. There's no ownership in this.
Yeah.
Everybody owns it.
I often go back and forth about this, and but in this system right now, the way it's set up, you have to protect yourself legally from others, but ultimately, hopefully we're getting to the place where the whole patent system and trademark and copyright thing is absolute nonsense, because it's corrupt from the foundation of it. Right. The first thing you do when you invent something is you write it down and send it off to the government. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Now they
No, they know.
they have every brilliant idea that comes from the mind right away, and have the ability to put the different aspects together too, of what the intelligentsia of the earth and humanity are really formulating. And we were just giving that to be used selfishly, essentially. So yeah, this whole thing's really got to, we're going to take a look at that.
Right. Where did I leave off?
At least we should be ensuring that those running this somehow are the selfless.
Right.
That, you know, we will be judged by the minds of men will be judged, not, you know, the way that we're judging now.
Right.
Intent and all that is huge, and that it's all fits in here. So comfortable saying that.
All right, where did I leave off? Am I on hence during the past 3 centuries? Is that where I'm at? You see, even the great ones themselves, but dimly sense reality, and through though they are aware of deeper underlying purposes, then are their chelas, yet even they see not the ultimate goal. They too are forced to use such unmeaning terms, and their teaching is absolute reality and ultimate realization. I think that's what I just read.
Yeah, I just had this idea that you're going to be some political appointee related to your job, probably.
Oh dear Lord, no, I hope not.
And I was thinking, what, 2028? I'm going, yeah, that makes sense. You're going to be
well,
you should be running this stuff. It'll
well,
come out. It's going to work itself out. Yeah.
Perhaps. I don't know. I've never thought about a life in politics, but I don't know. Anyway, let me read.
Yeah. All right.
Let's not talk about my future potential endeavors. Because the only endeavor I care about is making sure I'm headed in the right direction in this perspective. So, hence, during the past 3 centuries, group after group has appeared and played its part, and we today reap the benefit of their accomplishment. Under the cultural group, for instance, we find emerging the poets of the Elizabethan age and the musicians of Germany and of the Victorian era. Groups of artists are likewise to be found, giving us the famous schools which are the glory of Europe. 2 famous groups, one cultural and the other political, also played their parts, the one producing the Renaissance and the other bringing about the French Revolution. The effects of their work are still to be felt, for the modern humanistic movement, with its emphasis upon the past, which is completed in the present, and its search for the roots of man's equipment in the earlier trends, harks back to the Renaissance. Revolution and the determination to fight for the divine rights of man find their prime inaugurating influence and impetus in the Revolution in France. Revolt, the formation of political parties, the class warfare, which is so rampant today, and the splitting of every country into warring political groups, though sporadic always, have become universal during the past 200 years, and are all the results of the group activities started by the masters. Men have grown thereby and have learnt how to think, and even though they may think wrongly and may initiate disastrous experiments, the ultimate good is inevitable and unavoidable. Temporary discomforts, passing depressions, war and bloodshed, penury and vice may lead the unthinking into the depths of pessimism. But those who know and who sense the inner guiding hand of the hierarchy are aware that the heart of humanity is sound, and that out of the present chaos, and perhaps largely because of it, there will emerge those competent to deal with the situation and adequate to ask of unification and synthesis. This period has been occultly called the age of restoration of what has been broken by the fall. I like that.
Wow. Yeah.
I like that a lot. The time has come when the separate parts can be reunited and the whole stand together again in its earlier perfection. In fact, I like that so much, I'm going to highlight it here. Oh, wait, where's my highlight button? There it is. Okay. Sorry, give me a second. Okay. The religious groups have likewise been many, so many that their enumeration is hopeless. We have the groups of Catholic mystics who are the glory of the Occident. There are also the protesting Lutherans, Calvinists, and Methodists, the Pilgrim Fathers, those sour and earnest men, the Huguenot and the Moravian martyrs, and the thousands of modern sects in every group. These have all served their purpose and have led man to the point of revolt and away from acquiescence in authority. They have driven man to the stage of thinking for himself by the force of their unique example. They stood for freedom and the personal right to know. These latter groups have acted largely under the influence of the sixth and seventh rays, of the sixth and second rays. The cultural emerged under that of the fourth ray, whilst the first ray has impelled the political activities which have brought such changes in the nations. Under the fifth and third ray impulses, groups of scientific investigators have arisen, working with the forces and energies that constitute the divine life, dealing with the outer garment of God, searching from without towards the within, and demonstrating to man his essential unity with all creation and his relationship, intrinsic and vital, with all forms of life. The names of the individuals in any group are legion and of relatively no importance. It is the group and its interrelated work that counts. It is interesting to note that in the scientific group, the underlying unity is particularly noticeable, for its members are singularly free from sectarianism and selfish competition. This cannot be said of the religious and political groups. Oh, don't we know that? Oh, don't we know that? Yeah, I have to deal with that on a daily basis on the political side of things. That is the profession I've chosen, and I've been put there for some reason. So we'll see where that leads, like you said. So in relation to the many nations and the myriads of men on earth, these molding groups under the various divisions are few in number. Their personnel, their contribution to the growth of human expression, and their place in the plan can quite easily be traced. The point to be emphasized is that these have all been motivated from the inner subjective side of life. They have come forth under a divine urge and with a specific work to accomplish. They have all been composed in the primary stage of disciples and initiates of the lesser degrees. They have all been subjectively guided step by step by their own souls, which have, in their turn, been cooperating consciously with the hierarchy of knowers. This has been the case even when the individual man has been totally unaware of himself or his place in the group and that group's divine mission. Let it be remembered also that there has not been a single failure, though again and again the individual has not been cognizant of success. The mark of these workers is that they build for posterity, that those who have followed them have failed, and that those who have responded to this work have not been true to the ideal is disastrously true. But the initial
hold on, I got to read that again. Those who have not.
I'll just read it out.
Okay.
That those who have followed them have failed. Let me go back up one more. The mark of these workers is that they build for posterity, that those who have followed them have failed, and that those who have responded to this work have not been true to the ideal is disastrously true, but the initial group has uniformly achieved. This surely negates pessimism and demonstrates the exceeding potency of the subjective activity. Did you have a thought there, or?
Oh yeah, I just got to work through that one. Because he says, look, there's a lot going on here, man. I mean, you're working and you don't really know it. You could be totally unaware of yourself or your place in the group. Mm-hmm. Let it be remembered also that there has not been a single failure, though again and again the individual has not been cognizant of success. that those who have followed them have failed, and that those who have responded to this work have not been true to the ideal is disastrously true. Okay, I can see that, right? Okay. There's a distortion taking place at that point, right? Like it hasn't continued on the way that it was intended to be continued, but the initial group has uniformly achieved. So then it's time to really bring in the new idea and ideal, right? To keep it going properly.
Right.
This surely negates pessimism and demonstrates wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. And how can you know, and there's just so much to be said here, man. When you first come into incarnation, you don't remember. There's a whole process of remembering, right? And then, getting caught back up to speed, and then recapitulation, and then moving forward, and then that's recapitulation if it all works out properly, I want to say, right? There's a chance that things don't always work out exactly as anticipated. We know that because this is an overall thing. It's not pinpointed. I don't know. It's all right. Let's keep going because he'll probably we'll get more there.
See, so the three groups to which I earlier referred require a word of comment. Their work is curiously different to that of the other groups, and their ranks are recruited from all the ray groups, though the members of the third group, that of the financiers, are found primarily upon the seventh ray, that of ceremonial organization. In the order of their emergence, they are the groups of philosophers, psychologists, and businessmen. The group of philosophers of more modern date are already powerfully molding thought, whilst the ancient schools of Asiatic philosophers are just beginning to influence Western ideas. Through analysis, correlation, and synthesis, the thought power of man is developed and the abstract mind can be unified with the concrete. Through their work, therefore, that interesting sensitivity of man, with its three outstanding characteristics of instinct, intellect, and intuition, is brought to a condition of intelligent coordination. Instinct relates man to the animal world. Intellect unites him to his fellow men, whilst the intuition reveals to him the life of divinity. All these three are the subject matter of philosophical investigation, for the theme of the philosophers is the nature of reality and the means of knowledge. The two most modern groups are the psychologists, who work under the Delphic injunction, man, know thyself, and the financiers, who are the custodians of the means whereby man can live upon the physical plane. These two groups necessarily, and in spite of apparent divergences and differences, are more synthetic in their foundational aspects than any of the others. Excuse me. One group concerns itself with mankind, with the varying types of humanity, the mechanism employed, and man's urges, characteristics, and with the purpose, apparent or hidden, of his being. The other group controls and orders the means whereby he exists, controlling all that can be converted into energy and constituting a dictatorship over all modes of intercourse, commerce, and exchange. They control the multiplicity of form, objects which modern man regards as essential to his mode of life. Money, as I have before said, is only crystallized energy or vitality, what the Oriental student calls pranic energy. It is a concretization.
Concretization.
Yeah, I got it. It is a concretization of etheric force. It is therefore vital energy externalized, and this form of energy is under the direction of the financial group. They are the latest group in point of date, and their work, it should be borne in mind, is most definitely planned by the hierarchy. They are bringing about effects upon the earth, which are most far-reaching.
Wow. Well, this is something that's talked about quite a bit in the, in the reset type stuff that's going on right now, right?
Yeah.
The quantum financial system, and that there was a group of white hats, they call, setting this financial system up, and we're ultimately watching the downfall of the financial system, the exoteric financials, the current financial system, because we understand, I think everybody understands the level of corruption that it's just beyond repair.
Right.
It's corrupt because of the fact that it's been hijacked, and it's corrupt at the core of the whole thing. And it's separative in nature, and it's destroying the world piece by piece, essentially. It's denying resources to certain groups and countries, and it's allowing those who run it to be those who, the wealthy. It's flipped. But this is deep, man, because I don't think I've ever seen this before, or I can't remember having seen it, that this is definitely planned by the hierarchy. This alludes to truth, that it's actually happening right now. It's not so much conspiracy, it's taking place with their help. So I can kind of look at that in a different light now.
Right. All right, reading on here. Now that centuries have elapsed since the conclave in the 16th century, these external groups have played their part and performed most notable service. The results achieved have reached a stage where they are internationally effective, and their influence is not confined to one nation or race. The hierarchy is now faced with another situation which requires careful handling. They must gather up and weld together the various threads of influencing energy and the differing trends of thought power which the work of the groups since the year 1500 has produced. They have also now to offset some of the effects which are tending towards a further differentiation. This must inevitably be so when force is brought into contact with the material world. Initial impulses have in them potency both for good and for evil. As long as the form remains of secondary importance and relatively negligible, we call it good. Then the idea and not its expression controls. As time elapses and the energy of the thought makes its impact upon matter and lesser minds seize upon the particular type of energy or are vitalized by it, then evil begins to make its presence felt. This finally demonstrates as selfishness, separateness, pride, and those characteristics which have produced so much harm in the world.
Real quick note to that is harmony through conflict, conflict through harmony. I'm sorry, it's conflict, harmony through conflict.
Conflict, right.
Alludes to conflict first. So there, like we talked about, yes, there has to be this financial system that we're seeing now had to come about. And now in order for essentially for the harmony to come through, And this is the fourth ray, which is coming in 2025. So are we seeing this play out right in front of our eyes, sir?
Right. All right. About 17 years ago, the masters met and came to a momentous decision. Just as it had been decided at the earlier conclave to gather out of the inchoate masses of men, groups of workers along various lines, and set them the task of elevating humanity and expanding the human consciousness, so now it was felt wise to gather out of the many groups, a group which should contain, as does the hierarchy itself, men of all races, of all types and tendencies. This group has a specific mission, and some of the facts about it might be stated as follows. It is first of all an attempt at an externalization of the hierarchy upon the physical plane, or a small working replica of this essentially subjective body. Its members are all in physical bodies, but must work entirely subjectively, thus utilizing the inner subjective apparatus and the intuition. It is to be composed of men and women of all nations and ages, but each one must be spiritually oriented, all must be conscious servers, all must be mentally polarized and alert, and all must be inclusive. One of the essential conditions imposed upon the personnel of the group is that they must be willing to work without recognition on the subjective levels. They must work behind the scenes as do the great ones. Its members, therefore, must be free from all taint of ambition and from all pride of race and of accomplishment. They must also be sensitively aware of their fellow men and of their thoughts and conditioning environment. It is a group that has no esoteric organization of any kind, no headquarters, no publicity, no group name. It is a band of obedient workers and servers of the word, obedient to their own souls and to group need. All true servers everywhere therefore belong to this group, whether their line of service is cultural, political, scientific, religious, philosophical, psychological, or financial. They constitute part of the inner group of workers for humanity and of the world mystics, whether they know it or not. They will be thus recognized by their fellow group members when contacted in the casual ways of world intercourse. This group gives to the word spiritual a wide significance. They believe it to mean an inclusive endeavor towards human betterment, uplift, and understanding. They give it the connotation of tolerance, international synthetic communion, religious inclusiveness, and all trends of thought which concern the esoteric development of the human being. It is a group, therefore, without a terminology or Bible of any kind. It has no creed or any dogmatic formulations of truth. The motivating impulse of each and all is love of God, and it works out in love for one's fellow man. They know the true meaning of brotherhood without distinction of race. Their lives are lives of willing service, rendered with utter selflessness and without any reservations. The personnel of the group is known only to the elder brothers of the race, but no register of names is kept, and there are only three main requirements. One, a certain amount of at-one-ment between the soul and its mechanism is essential, and that inner triplicity, usually dormant in the majority, of soul, mind, brain must be in alignment and active. Two, the brain has to be telepathically sensitive in two directions and at will. It must be aware of the world of souls and also of the world of men. And three, there must also exit a capacity for abstract or synthetic thought. This will enable a man to leap over racial and religious barriers. When this is present, also there is an assured belief in the continuity of life and its correlation to the life after death. To sum up the situation, it must be noted that the groups in the past have stood for certain aspects of truth and have demonstrated certain ray characteristics. The new group will express all the aspects and have it in members on all the rays. The majority of the workers in the many groups have carried forward certain details of the plan and added their quota of energy to the forward urge of humanity, but they have, for the most part, done this without any true understanding of what they were accomplishing, and without any real comprehension of that body-soul relationship which leads to really intelligent work, unless we accept a few prominent mystics such as Meister Eckhart. They have been primarily groups of personalities, with that added touch of genius, which indicates a certain contact with the soul. The group that is now in process of formation is composed of those who are aware of the fact of the soul and have established a soul intercourse that is real and lasting. They look upon the mind, emotions, and body nature as simply an equipment whereby human contacts can be established, and their work, as they see it, is to be carried forward through the medium of this equipment, acting under the direction of the soul. They are therefore living souls, working through personalities, and not personalities actuated by occasional soul impulses. The members of the many groups were all somewhat one-sided, and their talents ran along some specific line. They demonstrated a capacity to write as Shakespeare, to paint like Da Vinci, to produce musical masterpieces like a Beethoven, or to bring about world changes like a Napoleon. But the new type of group worker is a rounded out individual with a capacity to do almost anything to which he sets his hand, but with a basic impulse to network on thought levels more than on the physical plane. He is therefore of use to the hierarchy, as he can be viewed in a variety of ways, where his flexibility and experience and his stability of contact can be all subordinated to the group requirements. The true exponent of this new group type will of course not appear for many decades. He will be a true Aquarian with a universal touch, an intense sensitivity, a highly organized mental apparatus, an astral equipment which is primarily responsive to the higher spiritual vibrations, a powerful and controlled energy body, and a sound physical body, though not robust in the ordinary use of the term. What then is the present situation in connection with the integrating group of mystics? Let me be somewhat explicit. In every European country in the United States of America and in parts of Asia and South Africa are to be found certain disciples, usually unrecognized in the world at large, who are thinking truth. Let me call your attention to that phrase. The most important workers in this new group, and those who are closest to the great ones, are those whose daily thought life is oriented by the new ideal. That this thought life of theirs may work out in definite esoteric activities may be true, but they are first of all and always those who live in and work from the high and secret place. Their influence is wielded silently and quietly, and they lay no emphasis upon their personalities, upon their own views and ideas, or upon their methods of carrying forward the work. These possess a full realization of their own limitations, but are not handicapped thereby, and proceed to think through and into objective manifestation that aspect of the vision which it is their mission to vivify into form. They are necessarily cultured and widely read, for in these difficult transitional times they have to cultivate a world grasp of conditions and possess a general idea of what is going on in the different countries. They possess in truth no nationality in the sense that they regard their country and their political affiliations as of paramount importance. They are equipped to organize slowly and steadily that public opinion which will eventually divorce man from religious sectarianism, national exclusiveness, and racial biases. One by one, here and there, they are being gathered out and are gathering to them those who are free from the limitations of past political, religious, and cultural theories. They, The members of the one group are organizing these forward-looking souls into groups which are destined to bring in the new era of peace and of goodwill. These latter, who are being influenced by the group members, are as yet only a few thousand among the millions of men. And out of the 400 accepted disciples working in the world at this time, only about 156 are equipped by their thought activity to form part of this slowly forming group. These constitute the nucleus of what will be someday a dominant force. During the next 25 years, their influence will become potent enough to attract political attention, provided those of you who have seen the vision of a powerful subjective body of thinking souls can speak the needed words and outline those concepts which will hasten the work of integration and put the units in this group in touch with one another. Do your utmost to see that this is done and make this the message and keynote of the work you all do wherever you are. Okay, I'm going to pause there.
Yeah, that's probably a good stopping point there.
Might be a good place to stop, because we've certainly talked about plenty that we should give thought to over the week. Just want to highlight where we left off so I don't miss my place.
Well, if that doesn't help us to see where this goes, I don't know what would.
Right.
And then, there's the need, we know we're seeing the requirements and, what's needed. And then, how do you deny, that kind of being put on us,
right,
to meet that for the love of God, essentially, man, right? How do you get around that? Sorry.
Right.
You can't deny it. All you can do is pretend this material doesn't exist and go off and be selfish. But my thought is once you read that and you've read it now and you've heard it now, this is going to stir everything that's needed inside of you to make all this happen.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's to somebody who's probably not heard these things before, it's a little bit daunting. And I can tell you, I'll never forget, man, how I was first exposed to this, because we were kind of talking about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
How I was first exposed to the Great White Brotherhood was I was reading a book called something like The Secrets of Kabbalah or something like that, or the Kabbalah, it was something like that. And it says, the Great White Brotherhood. That's all I needed. That's all I needed to see, bro.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what? Wait, what? What do you mean? Great White Brotherhood. I mean, this group of people who are good, that are doing what? They're what? I was like, that's a thing? Oh, that's who what? I was like, well, wait, like, oh my God. And then the search was really on after that. And that's when it wasn't long after that all the esoteric stuff kind of came about, the secret doctrine, and the Mahatma letters, initiation, human and solar, and then meeting certain people, and then all of that kind of just went from there. And then as we read this, it's so profound, it just makes me want to get my life more in line with this selflessness of this. It's just driving force.
Right.
How, it's so it's selflessness. It's like, gosh, just
that's the whole purpose of it. I mean, or that's the whole point of what we're doing.
There's a very second ray activity stuff going on here because you're becoming more loving. You know, the love wisdom, you're becoming more second ray. I want to say you're building more second ray energy in, because through this material, you're becoming more loving, more inclusive. This is huge. And Michael Robbins had talked about that quite a bit, to where he was a third ray, and then he's, you know, they're working on building in the second ray energy, right? And this material, man, this is building that in. This is building that love in, and wisdom, adding wisdom to intellect and active intelligence, and it's all synthesizing it incredibly. You can. This is making everyone who reads this more loving. Well, we did a lot. That was a lot of reading. Man,
It was.
It's so amazing. There were some huge points in this, and I'd like to go back even probably if I can during the week. And you made some huge points that would make good short clips.
Well, there's certainly a lot packed in here that gives insight into, well, I mean, just in the title alone, a new group of world servers. So, you know, here we go again. It's like a kind of a guidebook on the direction we're supposed to be heading in terms of service to humanity and what it means to be here doing what we're doing here. And yeah, there is a lot packed into, I feel like it was just a few short pages, but we did get through a bit on the PDF. I don't know how many pages that relates to in the blue book, but there was a lot packed in the reading today. So a lot for folks to think about, and yeah, worth for us to backtrack and flow back through it a little bit, because there's probably some nice short burst instructionals in here that we can, just little seeds of wisdom that we can extract from here.
Yeah, yes, sir. Very good stuff. I look forward to continuing that on and touching back on it throughout the week. I all the time, I don't mean to keep you or anything, but I come across these, these statements, and they're very profound, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to grab that out, and this can be used as a seed thought for contemplation, but then you go to the next paragraph and it's like, oh, this is such a good one. Let me pull this out, and it'll be a seed thought.
Before you know it, we're just reading the whole darn book.
You're just reading the book, man.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's just, there's so much. There's just so much wisdom in this. It's difficult to, and we've even been told, I think, we're not supposed to be necessarily organizing this out in sections and things like that. The intent is to read it, to absorb it, because it's what your soul is looking. It's feeding your soul essentially. But when there's little chunks of wisdom in here that we can, that I think will resonate with folks, it's probably good to get some additional discussion around some of these points outside of just reading from the book. So that would be a good thing for us to do in some future discussions.
And we're certainly recruiting for the group, for the people that are already in, that don't need recruiting. It's not a recruiting job, it's an identification
Mhm.
You know, where it's almost like, hey, did you know that you're part of this group? Oh,
Well,
you
guess
know,
what?
hey, you might be part of this group, man. What do you mean this group? What do you mean part of this group? Oh, you might be part of this. Chances are you're a part of this group. What? How could I be part of the group I didn't even know about? Oh, well, you're gonna figure it out here.
Well, I think DK talks about that in the raisin. Actually, it's rule 1 in raisin initiations, if I'm not mistaken. Where, well, I think that's more about you're going to have members of the group that are kind of at different stages,
Mhm.
but
Oh, every stage.
yeah,
I can see this, you know, these things epitomized in some people that we know, right?
right,
You can see that, you know, where this goes. You know, and there we have the examples have been set. You've got you know, we have the examples. They've been presented to us. It's incredible. And Christ being the, you know, Christ being the ultimate example. But even still, we have those here that can, you know, here with us today that can help, that are helping rather, and doing
right.
this work. You know, it's just, it's a matter, you know, at some point I want to say too, it's a matter of us not accepting any limitation as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because when you know that there are these advanced beings all, you know, throughout the universe and all and here on Earth, and then when you feel limit, you know, it almost helps to feel limited, because if you're any sort of, you know, have any moxie, you're gonna go, well, I don't accept that. I'm gonna do that now. I'm not gonna just hang out here and just be some, you know, dreamer. If you know all these people are here, where are they? I'm out of here too. You know, I'm gonna do it. I'm taking axe to the prison walls. So, all right, buddy.
All right. It's been a
We'll hit
good
it
one.
back. We'll hit it back next week.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.